Hello, screenwriters, and welcome to Writing for Screens. Ask me almost anything. Today's episode, How Do I Show, Not Tell? Oh, sorry about that. My name is Glenn Gers. I am the Chief Operating Everything of Writing for Screens, a channel which comes to you here on YouTube. You will see this is a screen grab of my channel main page. In it, I have tried to develop a bunch of lessons that give you some skills, some tools, some insights for you to try out to see whether they work for you. The things I have learned in a 25-year career writing for TV and movies. I'm on my way out of the business, and I thought I would try to give you some ideas that I had to figure out for myself so that you don't have to figure them out for yourselves. You can just test them out, see if they work for you. My belief is that there is no system, there is no rules, there is no formula. There are just things that you need to figure out for yourself as a writer. Every single writer has their own goals, their own style, their own way of working, and you need to figure out amongst all the ways of possible working that are going to be taught to you, which ones actually work for you. That is the job of every creative person, to figure out what they want to do and how they can do what they want to do the way that they can and want to do it. There's no right or wrong. There is just what you need to do and how you actually work. So, I have given you 50 10, 12-minute lessons on video. Each one has its own big, bold thumbnail that tells you what it's about: dramatic action, dialogue, flashbacks, genre, so that you can take those, look through them, try out some of the things, see if they work for you. If they don't do it. I strongly urge you to watch these videos, as many as you can. They are there for free. They are there 24/7, and basically anything I have to tell you is here. However, I also come here live, live every Wednesday at 1 p.m. Pacific Standard Time Zone to do different topics each week. This week, it's an Ask Me Almost Anything. And we're going to get to that right away. First, a couple of hellos. So, hello, Doug. Hello, Pelicans. Hello, Alex. Hello, Sonia and Doreen. I feel like this is like Christmas. Hello, Melanie. Very nice to meet you. I don't think we've talked before. Hi, R. Fung. And Hardy Harv Harv. Howdy. Nice to meet you. Okay, let's get right into this topic so that I can then get into other topics. But first, let's really talk about this issue of show, don't tell. This is really quite a common thing. One of the main things I've discovered is so many people approach me and say, like, I am afraid that what I want to do is wrong because I'm not making it visual. As if what they've learned through bad film teaching is that somehow dialogue is bad and that film is inherently nonverbal. This is not true. This is a misunderstanding of film theory. It happened historically for various reasons in the 1970s. I'll explain those at the end of the lesson, but let me get to the point here that will help you, which is, okay, show, don't tell does not mean don't write dialogue. It simply means make it happen. Make whatever it is that you are trying to communicate a dramatic action. Now I'm going to get into some details here and explain it, but one of the first things you should do is please look at my video on the subject of dramatic action. I've put links to these videos down at the bottom in the description here, so please take a look at dramatic action. Also, did a whole one on dialogue. That mentions all this stuff also. And there's one on exposition, which is very much a question of how you give information, including showing or telling. and on-the-nose dialogue, which is about the value sometimes of actually saying exactly what you mean. Anyway, the point about all of this is that screen language is a unique combination of visuals, dialogue, design, sound, and performance. It is all of those things working together. And honestly, your job is to use all of them, not to find one of them and diss the others. That is bad filmmaking. Any one of them that overwhelms the others to the point that you are failing to use all of these means for your screen language, that's bad filmmaking. So let's talk a little bit about this concept of no dialogue, or film is visual. Film is certainly visual, but it's also the characters taking actions, and almost always characters take actions, at least in part, by speaking to each other. This is just part of human existence. The truth is, a movie that had nobody talking to each other would be very hard to take. It's really not going to be a common film-going experience to enjoy a movie where nobody talks. Certain sequences, and in general, the idea of making things visually pleasing is fine. Now and then there will be scenes that work purely visual, but most of the time you want dialogue. The important thing is to have the dialogue not be explaining for the audience. Dialogue is action. Dialogue is one character trying to get the other to do something. It is actually an act done upon or to or with the other person. There is a relationship formed in which something is being done. Drama. Now, the most thing is, for instance, telling. Like the idea that something could be just in dialogue can make very, very powerful things happen in a story. The important thing is whether or not the thing that they are telling has a dramatic impact to the people in the story at that moment. For example, you have two people in a house. There's a knock on the door. They look out. It's the police. And one of the people says to the other, "Oh, by the way, I was meaning to tell you, I stole a lot of jewels and hid them in the closet. I was going to tell you, didn't get around to it. The police may be here about that." Now, this is telling. This is simply one person catching you up on a thing that was not dramatized visually. However, by that act of telling, everything that is going to happen in the next scene is going to be amped up and fascinating, because we know that one person has committed a crime. The other one has to keep the police from discovering that. It amps up everything, but that was just telling. Now, it would not be okay to do that same scene and have one character come home and say, "Whew, I just spent an hour with the police. They didn't know that I had stolen some jewels, so I told them this and they told me that." That's the failure to make something dramatic. That is simply reciting stuff. However, it is really important that you understand how much of film relies on dialogue to be action. That's key. The basic story here, the background to bad film teaching is that in the history of film, there was an early period, silent film, when they didn't have the technology to record dialogue, and they were trying to figure out the language of screen work, because it was a weird mixture of painting and photography and design, and then they discovered editing mattered, and the framing, the shots, the composition, all of those things were worked out in the first decades of filmmaking. However, they often would have title cards in which people's dialogue would be printed out for you to read. There was, even in the most visual of periods, there was never purely visual movies. There was always a verbal element. Furthermore, the title cards very often would simply announce who a character was. Like somebody would come home, the character would walk in the door and it would have a title card that would say, the father-in-law, he doesn't approve of this new beau. All of that stuff was in. After a while, when sound came in, the flexibility of filmmaking was extremely limited. For a long time, film cameras at the time were enormous. They were like the size of refrigerators and had to be moved on these giant trucks. The lighting was very, very hot and bright in order to expose the film properly. And the sound equipment required that everything be muffled, and they created these sound stages. Therefore, everything became very stagey. Now, this is after 20, 30 years of really flexible, fluid filmmaking out on the streets. All of a sudden, because of sound, they had to bring it back into the studio. And the entire golden age of Hollywood, from 1927 through 1947, all of those studio films were made essentially within the language of shooting in a studio. And as a result, they became very play-like. They became very dialogue-based. And the visuals were limited by the inflexibility of the equipment. In the 1970s, film theory began. Okay, there was a little bit of academic film theory, but cinema studies as we know it began in the 1960s and flourished in the 60s and 70s. That's when film schools in America really started to develop, the 3 or 4 that were happening then. And what they were doing was looking back at the full history of cinema and trying to understand the art and appreciate it as an art form. As a result, they became very excited by the possibilities that were happening, especially in Europe and overseas at the time, where the studio rules were not applied. So therefore, they began to emphasize the visual. Furthermore, they were very, very excited about the power of the director as the central author of a work of film, which in the studio era was not the case. It was the studio itself, the producers. All of this means that when film schools and film theory in America developed, they developed in reaction to the studio system, which was very stage formulaic, very stage-bound, very dialogue-heavy. And therefore, a sort of mantra became, film is visual. You have to start to tell. And as a result, for the next 30, 40 years, the development of visual language and technique flourished. However, it did so with the accidental victim being dialogue. The truth is, any good film will require you to use visual and verbal. It's just part of the art. Okay, so let's talk a little bit more. I see a lot of questions, and I'm going to no, you know what? I'm going to get to the questions in a minute. So let's talk about the basic idea of not writing dialogue as somehow better writing. The examples where people in dialogue have had extremely crucial sequences in truly great films. Luke, I am your father. That is simply somebody telling someone else a very big plot point. There may be spoilers here for those of you who have not seen classic films. I apologize. Luke, I am your father. That's telling. Okay, the dramatic build up to it allows the moment of telling to be devastating. However, let's not kid ourselves. That's just a guy saying, hey, bit of info, I'm your father. There's a movie called Klute, Klute. It's a thriller about catching a murderer. I don't want to spoil too much, but there is a point at which the villain sits down and explains what happened. He tells this, and he explains to the woman who is trying to find out what happened to her friend. He tells her. He just sits down and tells her. It is one of the most riveting scenes you can imagine. The tension about this murderer talking about his murder, and he says, like, I don't know what I'm going to do now, and it is terrifying. It's just telling. It's just someone sitting there and telling. In Jaws, the USS Indiana monologue, famous scene in which we finally understand a little bit about the character of Quint. And this monologue would not be better as a flashback. This would not be better visually. If you were to break that scene up in order to show the things he is talking about, you would destroy the point of the scene and the value of the scene, which is the connecting and bonding and understanding of these men on this boat in the middle of the sea trying to kill a shark. The Godfather, okay? First of all, the opening scene of The Godfather is simply somebody telling somebody else a long story, and then the other one debating with him, telling him why he will or will not help him about this. It is an extraordinary scene which serves in so many ways to dramatize the power and morality, the code of The Godfather. It is a scene which would not work better if we were to have seen all of these events acted out visually and through making it a scene. Sometimes the dialogue is the best way to rivet the audience into the relationship which is giving us the dramatic engine of the story. Likewise, two more. Pulp Fiction, the story of Bruce Willis's father's wristwatch. There is just, once again, somebody sits down and monologues about this wristwatch. This would not be better as a series of flashbacks or a series of scenes or even a visual, somehow visually showing this. It is an incredibly powerful scene. It would not be better shown, not told. Likewise, Saving Private Ryan, which is a wonderfully visual movie. So is Pulp Fiction, by the way. So are all of these. But the discussion of the Captain Miller's job, of his life back home, is an ongoing bit of dialogue, and then there's finally a speech about this topic. I'm trying not to spoil things, but I'm telling you that is purely a case of someone telling someone else something about themselves. It is, once again, incredibly important to see the effect of telling on the relationship and on the story. That telling is an action. It is a motivation for the rest of the story. It is a way to bond this group of men who have to fight together. There are very strong examples where telling is a crucial part of film narrative. Furthermore, there is such a thing as bad showing, okay? Lazy storytelling in terms of visuals. For instance, how many movies have you seen where the villain is physically imposing, often has some disfigurement or menacing visual element, or they're in armor with skulls painted on it, or whatever it is? That is used instead of character. It is simply showing. We're showing you that guy is a bad guy. When in fact, that hulking monster in armor with skulls painted on it could sit down and say, I hate this. I am a gentle giant. I hate being a villain, but it's the family business and I have to do it. There's so much to be done with telling that showing is simply the cheap way out. Even saving the cat, which is in theory a way of showing your hero is a good person. Or more often, you see the villain hurting an anonymous person. You introduce the villain by showing them hurting an anonymous person. Arguably, I'd say that's just telling. That is simply a scene with no narrative import except to tell the audience, this is a bad guy. It has nothing to do with the story or the characters, and they tend to be really boring. Those scenes tend to deaden the story, even though they are showing us the badness of the villain. Because the point is, without a relationship to the central characters, it's honestly not, that's done for the information of the audience, and the audience feels the narrative letdown when you do that. Whether you do it verbally or visually, it's not good writing. Furthermore, things like establishing shots or showing a close-up of an object, or very often when you want to establish the royalty or power of a character, they will show a triumphal parade or a big ritual, or often if you want to show the characters have gone into the underworld, they'll go into a dark nightclub with lots of music pounding and flashing lights. None of that is good visual. None of that is good storytelling. It's a cheap visual tell. It's a way of saying, ooh, we're in the underworld now. Powerful music, lots of flashing lights, people dressed up in sexy costumes, dancing a lot. It's dead story time. It's bad story. Even though it is showing, it is not narratively involved, and so therefore it's just as bad as it's visual telling. All right, so that's my big lesson on showing and telling. I'm just going to run through it one more time to make sure that it's very clear. Show, don't tell does not mean do not write dialogue. It means make it happen. Make it a dramatic action involving the characters. Make it something that matters in the relationships of the story. And that action can be dialogue, it can be visual, it can be any number of things. Screen language is a unique combination of visuals, dialogue, design, sound, and performance. Your job is to use all of them. That's the lesson. Okay, now I'm going to quickly go back and catch up on all these hellos. Hello, Broken Deity. Nice to meet you. Hello, Stefan. Hope you would talk about what verbs we should avoid. I will put that on the list to get to in a second. That's it. That's an interesting question, actually. Verbs we should avoid. Hello, Jakia. Very nice to see you. Very glad that you are back. Thank you. Hi, Jean from your ward. Hello, Germany football. Direct screenwriting instructor Steve Douglas said that dialogue is irrelevant in screenwriting in his class. He claims it's a last resort of revelation. Okay, I feel badly. I do not like to get into, stuff, but that's wrong. It's just wrong. Fight me. Fight me, Steve. This is what I'm saying. There have been now a couple of generations. We're talking about from the 1960s when this film theory was built and developed and film schools were built and developed. 60s to the 80s to the 2000s. We've been talking about 2 or 3 generations, if you count a generation as 20 years, which is what the people who do statistics tend to say. We're talking about 3 generations in which people have been teaching each other things. They were working it out in the first generation. They were discovering. They were making claims in order to build something new. That has become a fossilized, meaningless formula. And so therefore, what you see now is a lot of teachers are simply reciting a fossilized, meaningless formula without really thinking about it. And they're wrong. It's just I'll debate anyone on this one. Set me up a debate. I will debate anyone on the idea that, quote, dialogue is irrelevant. That's just dopey. I enjoyed Buster Keaton's silent film, though. No, not at all. That's what I'm saying. If you look at Buster Keaton's silent film, 2 things are happening. One, there is dialogue in a Buster Keaton or any other silent film. And second of all, very often, there's actually narration in the title cards. However, my point is, if you look at Buster Keaton, He's very good at making sure that the information is not just told, that it is acted out, it is played between characters in the scenes. That's why Keaton is great. I mean, one of the reasons Keaton is great. Hello, Wolf Powers. Yeah, I do not exclude silent film when talking about this this stuff. It's sorry about that. I got to tell you, silent film is a really good place to learn about film narrative. One of the first thing you'll learn is that there was dialogue. Okay, hello, Wolf Powers. Hello, Robert Freeman. I loved Corey Mandel's tool in his screenwriting seminar that start with the character fear. I don't know why it works. I suddenly had many ideas for a screenplay. That's great. I don't know Corey Mandel's work. But I would say any tool that sparks some kind of excitement or inspiration or path for you is well worth following. Please explore every theory in the world. If for some reason you love the idea of no dialogue and you can make it work, do it. I'm not saying don't. I'm saying it's insane to teach aspiring filmmakers to be afraid of dialogue. That's my point. How about biopic? I am trying to write, okay, new question. Let me see. I'm trying to write a movie about Robert Kennedy. Should I find out everything he ever said and stick with actual quotes? I will get to that, but the short answer is no. Hi, Donna. Hello, play your own style. I remember some said the first film schools around the 1930s. Yes, absolutely. There were film schools since the start of film. There was also film theory since the start of film. Those schools actually, especially in the U.S., were relatively uninfluential. There was a wave in the 1960s of film theory, the French New Wave, the Italian neorealists, and film theorists taking film seriously as a creative art form as opposed to as a popular medium of junky entertainment, tended to start in the 60s. However, yes, absolutely. As soon as there were films, there were film schools. But they were not usually that influential until the 1960s and 70s. Hello, something else is here. Finally, glad you got back. That's good. Vader didn't know Luke's name. He just said, no, I am your father. Okay, I definitely defer to you. I do not remember that one way or another. But cool. Either way, he's telling him he's his father. It's like, hey, you nameless guy, I am your father. I think he knew Luke's name. He may not have said it, but I think he knew it. I think the best scene of dialogue is the ending of Steve Jobs by Aaron Sorkin. I'm poorly, astonishing. Yes. No, you're not going to get any argument with me about Sorkin writing good scripts. I agree. I don't know about best. They're all good. The Famous Watch. Yes. Talking about Pulp Fiction and the watch. By the way, that's one of those, there are certain things where you do not want to see something that you want to be told about it and not have to look at it. Okay. I never wanted to watch Saving Private Ryan, got scared. No, not everyone should watch everything. Most of the things I just described are actually quite dark and mature and sometimes violent. And I would not absolutely say you have to watch those. I was just using them as good examples of commonly known movies which are commonly considered great, which commonly use dialogue. So we don't need to establish the villain is evil. That is not what I said. What I said is you do not need to establish the villain is evil only through visual means. Absolutely, it would be good to establish the villain is evil. There are many, many ways to do that. And I simply would say there is something cheap about having a character either save a cat, like do a nice thing, or do a bad thing in order to establish their character without a relation to the rest of the story. Very often, They will kill off one of their henchmen or close the schools or whatever it is. And that has nothing to do with the main character and the main story. And what I was saying was it would be better if whatever they are doing relates to the story and is not simply a standalone demonstration of goodness or badness. That's my point. Okay, let me go back to a couple of questions. So the first question is, talk about what verbs we should avoid. All right, this is tricky. Technically, don't avoid any. But I would say the one thing you want to avoid is states of being. To be, I am, I was, he is, and this depends on your language, but there are verbs that are, he is mean. It would be better to show, well, first of all, it would be better to show him being mean, but second of all, to say, Joe watches the waves, is better than Joe is watching the waves. It's a minor thing, but one is a static state and one is an action. Watches is better than is watching. So if you can try and avoid the is, was, are, be verbs that in English, I do not know in every language how this works for you, but there are going to be some verbs which are about a state of being, an unchanging, static state. Verbs are supposed to be actions, a thing that someone does. And therefore, if you can turn your static verb into an active verb, it tends to be a good idea. Okay, and then the other question was about biopics. First of all, there are the first thing you should do with any genre, biopics being a genre, is look at those biopics that you think are great, and analyze how they do it. Did a video on this called Take Art Apart. But my main thing is that, because there's a lot of varieties of how you do biopics. Most biopics, honestly, I think make a mistake by falsifying for movie values the reality of the story. But the main thing is to say that you only are writing with actual quotes. That's a cool challenge if you can do it. It's going to be very hard to do because you're going to have no scenes where Robert Kennedy has personal relationships unless you have an actual quote from a personal relationship moment. I just don't see how you could use only real quotes for a main character. Famously, I believe in Oppenheimer, some of the testimony in the Strauss hearings is actual testimony, but there's also scenes where people are just talking, and clearly Nolan wrote those. The main answer would be, if you're trying to write a movie about a character, you should find out what you can about that person's life, but then you need to construct dramatic scenes that will play out your particular vision of the details of the story you are telling within their life. You can't tell a whole life. Obviously, the movie would be as long as a life if you were showing the whole life. So when you take a life and you reduce it down to 2 hours or even 10 hours in a miniseries, you're going to be picking and choosing, and you're also going to be picking and choosing because you are interpreting. You are telling the story that you believe has meaning in the demonstration of any life in any story. Any character is being used in the story to raise a question or make a point, to give an insight into a particular idea. So the answer is definitely do not restrict yourself to only dialogue that was in historical records. Okay. Robert Freeman says about the establishing the villain, I got more confused after your explanation how to establish the character. What is your meaning of having something to do with the story? Okay, I am definitely going to have to refer you to my videos here on the channel. Go to my main channel, go to these first 3 playlists. The first one is Screenwriting Essentials. The second one is Screenwriting Tools, Skills, and Craft. And the third one is The Process, Being a Writer. Because this question is simply too big, too large for me to take on in the 15 minutes we have left. The ones that I really think you should look at there are definitely about dramatic action. That's really, really important. And then there's one on character that I would suggest. And basically, the thing I'm saying here is an action by itself is meaningless. If you simply, I can't remember which video I talk about this in, but suppose you have a character stab another character to death. That could be a satisfying act of justice, although ideally we would not use the death penalty, but in movies they often do. Or that could be the horrible thing that creates the main character's motivation to build a new hospital. That action by itself is meaningless. Things are only meaningful in context of the story of the characters that you are centering your story on. Famously, you can tell the story of Beowulf from the characters, the human beings who are being menaced by this monster, or you can tell the story of the monster who is menaced by the characters. Both stories have been told. Anyway, my answer is no. Obviously, this is you're being too literal. The Act One. The Act One certainly should have happened yet, but the main thing is the villain is not established by being evil out of relation to the main character, is what I'm trying to say. Also, honestly, you could introduce your villain in the second act. It would be unusual, but it's not impossible. Yes, the scene right before, yes, every scene in your Robert Kennedy story is going to be essentially fictional because you're going to be making up things that people say and you're going to be choosing how they say it in your interpretation of Robert Kennedy's life. You would be ill-advised to tell a story about a true person and make up things that go contrary to known things about that person. For instance, if in the Ambassador Hotel, after Robert Kennedy wins the primary and he goes back to the kitchen and he suddenly says, you know what? I don't want to be a president. I want to be a pizza chef. That would probably not a good idea. There is a limited range of fictionalization that one can do within a true story. And I'm putting all of those in air quotes because it's very complicated dramatizing real life. When you dramatize real life, you are, by the act of narrating it, interpreting it. You are in the act of choosing which things will be told and what they will mean to the characters. You are interpreting, you are steering it. Our lives don't have a specific known meaning. Everybody's life can be interpreted different ways, which is painful but true. So therefore, any version of a life is fictional, even if you are using verifiable events that happened. The way that you are presenting them will give them a meaning that is not inherent to them. Are there any verbs that are too basic to use? No, absolutely. No. Sometimes it's great to just use a really simple verb to say, he laughs, he hits, he walks. Cool. You don't have to use flowery language. Sometimes it's nice, but most of the time it simply calls attention to the writer instead of to the thing happening. So you got to figure out your language. Everyone is different. But my answer would be also, with all of these questions, you guys are clinging to rules as opposed to finding your choices. There is no rule for verbs. Like my advice to avoid the states of being verbs, that's just advice. It's not a rule. You can do it. There's plenty of good writing where there's plenty of static verbs, even screenwriting. Some people will write very flowery language. I'm just saying most of the time you want to be careful about getting too flowery because it distracts from the involvement in the characters' lives, in my opinion. Into the Wild is a good biopic, I'd say. Absolutely, I agree. The Door is a bad one. Absolutely, I agree. Thank you, nobody. I don't personally necessarily view the truthful, the accuracy, the reporting quality of a biopic story as the value. It does bother me personally when people tell a true story and make stuff up. However, it is the main thing is if you are capturing a coherent and consistent vision. For instance, The Doors. I don't like The Doors. I don't think it's a good movie. However, it's got some good scenes and some interesting ideas. Into the Wild, I personally think is fantastic because it is capturing the book's interpretation of the main character and doing it in a, I believe, very authentic and truthful way, even though many of the things that happen in Into the Wild aren't exactly how they happened, even in the book. So Germany Football Rocks. I am sorry. Everything you say opposes my screenwriting teacher, Steve Douglas, which I found through his class. This is very important. About different. Let me just mention. I did a video on this topic called Screenwriting Rules. And my point about this is no teacher has the whole answer. And the important thing is whether or not your teacher is helping you to write the kind of work you aspire to write and writing in the way that you can write. There is no actual correct answer. If Steve Douglas is helping you, great. I'm just saying if you are frustrated, then don't do it. If I'm saying things that are causing you to have less fluent writing, don't take my advice. It's not important that an opinion is stated about an art form. You have to make up your own version of that art form. You have to decide what kind of storytelling you want to do. And you have to decide what your skills and your talents will allow you to do. And you have to do that. There is not a right answer. I am somewhat troubled by some of the things you're saying about Steve Douglas in his class, but I don't know him. I cannot say. All I can say is the one specific thing about dialogue being irrelevant is just not true. I wish I weren't getting into it, but that's just not true. Anyway, the answer is any teacher who helps you to focus and be productive and feel confident and feel more skilled and flexible is good. And any teacher who makes you feel less skilled or more confused or less motivated is not good, in my opinion. This is just opinion. These are all opinions. It is an art form. There is no right or wrong. Okay. Why do so many people keep digging on character archetype? I assume you mean like why do they say it's important? Once again, teachers very often steer towards or rely on formula. because they want something that they can teach you. And it's easier to say, use these types that many people don't. Many great writers don't believe in archetypes. What happens is that there tend to be fads in teaching, and among them are various archetypal categorizing of characters lately. I don't know why, not my favorite thing. Okay. Hello, Lois Sells Photography. What are the differences between writing a short film and a feature film? I've discussed this in a couple of other places, and I'm a little worried about our time, but basically the main difference, but you should check some of my older Ask Me Anythings. I've gone into this. The main thing about a short is that it doesn't have as many stages of story development. In other words, you'll establish or create characters and a world and a situation, and then there will be a small amount of change, and then a final revelation or conclusion. A short just doesn't have room for many stages of development of the story. A feature film or a series will have twist after twist, change after change, lesson after lesson. So the main thing is that with a short, you have a simpler set of ideas that you are trying to communicate. That's, to me, the difference. All the other rules, I think, or approaches apply to either one. The difference is that you are working in a short, a limited space, and so therefore you can only make so many moves, and that's great. Those moves got to be clear, got to be emotional, got to be based in character or whatever you want to base them in. The main thing, the difference between a short and a longer piece is the number of developments, the number of changes and challenges that the story will go through. And there's not a better or worse. It's just a matter of, you don't want to apply the goals of longer storytelling to a short, because it won't hold it. You can't say like, oh, they're going to learn this, then they're going to fail at this, and then they're going to try this, and then that's just too much stuff. It's going to be a more of a simple statement, or a simple path to the statement. Even if it's got twists and turns within the 5 to 15 minutes. You are welcome, Eric. Thanks for doing these live chats. For those of us who arrived late, can you repeat your initial premise? Why is show or don't tell misunderstood? Yes, I will do that. But I do want to point out, every one of these live streams, when I click finish on my little software here, it then makes this into a video which can be watched at any time. So if you've missed something, or it just went by and you want to go back to it, it's there for all time, or at least as long as YouTube exists. But here's very briefly these thoughts. Oops, sorry, wrong one. Show, don't tell does not mean don't write dialogue. It means make it happen, make things dramatic actions. That if you have something you want to get into the story, it needs to be presented in terms of the characters taking action in relation to each other. That is what a dramatic action is. I did a whole video on dramatic action. Please look at it. Screen language is a combination of many other art forms: visuals, dialogue, design, sound, performance, all of them. You need to use all of them. It matters. Every one of them has a value to the overall screen art. That is my big lesson. I also want to very briefly talk about Sam Lipsyte here. Sam Lipsyte wrote a book that I mentioned, it's just a great little comic or painfully comic noir story about 1990s punks. It's called No One Left to Come Looking for You. I was reading an interview with Sam Lipsyte in a thing called LitHub, and he said something about writer's block that I just wanted to pass on because I thought it was really useful. He said, they asked, what do you do about writer's block? And he said, I have mixed feelings about writer's block. I think it's a very real thing, but happens for different reasons at different times. So the solutions may vary. Sometimes there really is a psychological problem. Your fear has your desire in a headlock. The blank, I think it means blank page, I think they typed it wrong. The blank page keeps psyching you out. You can feel the novel or story or whatever welling up inside you, but every approach to it feels sealed off. Every sentence, every angle seems false and wrong. In this case, I often try to turn, to write in another direction, to move laterally. Sometimes we've been in one groove with something for so long, we can't imagine the work told in another way. From another vantage, or with a slight shift in tone, that can make all the difference. But at other times, the block is really just a case of the tank being empty. We are low on the emotional and creative energy needed to really get going. Every once in a while, it helps me to just stay away for a little while, not force it, let things fill up again. I just wanted to say that this is really valuable thinking, that basically what he's saying is, and it's not unlike what I'm saying, there is no single unified rule to any of this, that writing is a complicated and personal artistic act, and therefore you need to figure out what your relationship to the problem or the task is, and then you have to think about, because there could be more than one way, or there could be more than one reason, or it's different this time than it was last time. So you can't just apply a rule to any of it. Okay. So you are welcome, nobody. How do you find your voice? How do you create? Let me see if I can find this. I did a whole Ask Me Anything on this. Let me see if I can find, I will try and find it and put a link to it down under this video in about 10 minutes after the video is done. The basic idea for me about voice is that you are learning to take in all of the influences, artistic and personal, that you have, so that your voice is partly made up of all the things you like or hate, all the things that you've experienced, the artwork that you find powerful, the ones that connect with you. You kind of steal from them, but then you add in your own feelings, your own instincts. And the main thing is, you need to find your own voice. You need to be knowledgeable about different possible ways to do it, knowledgeable about different formulae or rules, but not stuck with any of them. You want to take from all of that what you feel good about, and then you need to have some confidence that whatever comes out of you is your voice, and that you need to work on just liking that and working on making that work better for what it is. The whole point about finding your voice is it's yours. And so anything you do that's authentically coming from your feelings is the start of that. Obviously, you're going to need to think about, the way your voice works, because we're very self-conscious about using our voice. But the main thing I would say is there is not a right voice. There are business models where people want you to have certain style or certain voice or certain attitudes and beliefs. And that's fine. If you want to be in the business, you have to give up your voice to a certain extent. But if you're trying to truly find your own voice, you need to listen to yourself, and you need to mainly do it. The more you do, the more it will come out like your voice, unless you are trying to imitate. If you are out of fear trying to imitate another voice, if you're like, oh, they did it right, you won't be using your voice. If you write the way you feel like it without attacking it or judging it or comparing it, then you can look at that and keep doing it. You'll develop your style. there isn't a right or wrong, and there isn't a rule. It's simply learning to trust your instincts. I did a video about that. Oops. Sorry about that. My pen. Instinct. There's a video on instinct that I think is really helpful for that. And then there's another one about writing style. Yeah. Writing style. You might want to try that one. Because I get into some of that. I think it's very important. Okay. Sonia says, ask 5 screenwriting teachers, get 5 different answers. Yes, true. I think it's important to learn and try out different techniques and find out what fits best. What works becomes your own set of rules. Okay, everybody listen to Sonia here. That's exactly right. There is no, this is not science, okay? There is no like, okay, we can test this and this one has 20% more, vitamins. It's art. It's a matter of opinion. Even the greatest art in the world that's recognized as great, a lot of people don't like it. And other people like other things. It's not, there are no right or wrong rules. So any teacher who is telling you this is the absolute truth about art, try some other teachers as well. Okay, yeah, the other thing, yeah, no, about 3 acts, obviously you don't really, a 1-minute short is not really going to have 3 acts. Okay, just let's be real here. How could you possibly get 3 acts into 1 minute? I mean, I guess you could, but it would be very funny. Beginning, middle, and end. Forget 3 acts. Beginning, middle, end. A short has that. Okay, a short has a beginning, a middle, and an end. Try to use that as your model. What is the beginning? Who is it about? What are they trying to do? What is their obstacle to doing it? What's their world, their situation? What is their goal in this story? What are they feeling? And then what happens? What do they do? What is done to them? And then how does that get resolved? Beginning, middle, end. You are welcome. Okay. Does length really matter in the end? I'm working on my first short, but it is really rather long, reaching about 30 minutes, but I hate being constrained by time. Okay, the answer is the only problem, and certainly no, there is no God will not strike you down if you do a 30-minute short. The only thing about a 30-minute short is you have to decide what you're going to do with it. For instance, shorts are traditionally shown before movies at film festivals. That's like one of the main places that they go. 30 minutes is too long for that. They tend to want to keep it to around 5 to 10, because the audience is waiting for the main movie. But if you're just going to like put it on a website or put it on YouTube, 30 minutes is great. Don't worry about it. Okay. I'm curious how much of the dramatic factor of dialogue is illustrated in literally describing how they are saying things. These are big questions for the end of the hour. Novels are different. In novels, it does matter how you describe how someone is saying something. In a script, the actor is going to perform it, and they're going to perform it the way they need to perform it. And there's not that much you can say like loudly, but it may not work for them and the director to do it loudly. So I would say if you say like angrily, but some people's anger is very controlled, and some people's anger is all out there. So even that it's not a bad thing to add a bit of an adverb here and there, but overall you want the thing they are saying to take the emotion. Even if it's not doing it directly, the interchange of characters is very much how you do that. It is not a bad thing now and then to describe how a person is behaving while they talk in a script. However, in a novel, that can be a lot more. There you go. And you are welcome, Stefan. That's absolutely my pleasure. I am glad to have talked to all of you about all of this, and I will see you next week. Go write something.